To say that the Vancouver Canucks were a bit of a mess, I would say it was a huge understatement. But NHL coaching jobs are very rare and they're hard to come by. So if you're Adam Foote and they say, hey, listen, would you like to try and steer this club going forward? He said, yes, they signed this. I like this signing. Farhan, what about you, new coach of the Canucks, Adam Foote?
Well, we'll see, right? I mean, when you look at the resume, it's not long. We certainly know that Adam Foote's resume as a player was extensive
Mm-hmm.
and very, very good. Um, he's had a season and a half in the Western Hockey League as a head coach before coming to Vancouver. And, the time in Kelowna with the Western League team didn't go necessarily that well when they were hosting the Memorial Cup that year. And then he's had 2.5 seasons behind the Canucks bench as an assistant. Everything he's done prior to that was on the development side, not necessarily as a bench coach. I did a bit of that in Colorado, and um, Adam Foote's a good guy, and I wish him all the best, and I hope it works out for him. But it kind of came down to him and Manny Malhotra, who's been in the organization as well, and probably has a little bit longer of a coaching resume, but neither of them have been NHL head coaches. And then also Mitch Love, who is in Washington right now as an assistant, just had his season wrapped up. And so he was also one of the finalists after the 7 formal interviews. So thin pool, right, you would say, and a lot of
Yeah.
work to be done here in Vancouver. We'll see if Adam's up to the task.
Was this done more to appease Hughes and be like, well, Hughes likes him, and so if this kind of keeps him here, like is it a stopgap band-aid? Because originally that's what I thought from the outside. If this is just to appease Hughes, you have to. He's your best player.
Yeah, I think that's part of it, right? And I don't know that both Foote and Patrick Allvin, the general manager, said yesterday they didn't talk to Hughes during the hiring process. The last time Hughes was spoken to, allegedly, was when Jim Rutherford spoke to him right after Rick Tocchet decided to leave. But certainly a guy like Adam Foote would have Hughes' stamp of approval. He did say at one point that he's the best coach he's ever been around, certainly giving him a lot of credit for his own personal development, along with the improvement of the Canucks defense overall. And you've got to give Adam Foote credit for a lot of that. But there's so many other problems that you've got to deal with. So I think that's part of it. But I think this is an organization that didn't want to get rid of Rick Tocchet, right? I mean, they offered him a lot of money. And, ultimately wasn't necessarily as much as what he's getting in Philly, but it still would have made him arguably one of the top 5 coaches in the league. So it wasn't necessarily a money thing. So I think from a Canucks standpoint, by keeping Foote, you get some continuity and some familiarity with the players in the building, and it doesn't feel like you have to start over again.
Now, I know a lot of times when a coach will leave, all the assistants go or the assistants aren't brought back. And you'd mentioned continuity. Are there going to be other coaches that were working on the Tocchet team that are going to stick around with Foote? Have you heard anything, or all TBD?
Yeah, I think they sounded like Yogi Slavkovsky, who is their skills coach and then promoted to assistant coach. They'd like to keep him in some capacity. Probably makes more sense to keep him in the skills coach capacity if you want to get some experience in for the forwards and for the D. So we'll see what that looks like. Sergei Gonchar was kind of a part-time guy. So I think they were finding previously that it wasn't working in a part-time capacity. Will they keep that? I don't know. They haven't written it off. So I could see Gonchar winding up in Vancouver or in Philadelphia potentially, in that part-time capacity. I'm not sure if it worked here, but I think the organization would like to put some experience around Adam Foote, but Adam's got to be comfortable with whoever they bring in, right? Like they can't decide his staff for him. He's got to be involved in that. So, I think that'll be a part of it.
You're a sports journalist working for TSN in Vancouver, and we have a giant country. And you would think, well, every spot should have, its own chance to shine. But for the past 48 hours, the overarching story across this country, and especially hockey, is the potential demise of the Toronto Maple Leafs from coast to coast. And it's a movie we've all seen before. And tonight, it's going to be Game 6. Oh, you're cheering for that because it's a juicy story. Do you think tonight the Florida Panthers will finally put a pin in the core 4 and all of this and just put it out of its misery?
Yeah, I think so. It's a fragile group. They showed that in the last game. They've shown that in this series, and this will be the biggest acid test / indictment you could possibly come up with, right? Because if they can take this back to a Game 7 in Toronto, and potentially win, every question will be answered, right? And they'll be exalted again. And if they lose, a 4-game collapse here is something they'll never live down. So is it the end for Mitch Marner? Probably. Is it the end for Brendan Shanahan? Quite possibly. Contractually, probably not for Austin Matthews and, or John Tavares, who just wants to stay there regardless of what the numbers look like. So, yeah, it's a huge night. It is a huge night. And look, I'm not a fan of most Toronto teams, but certainly not this one or the Blue Jays because they garner way too much oxygen.
Yeah.
I'm a fan of the Canadian Football League, which means I want Canadian hockey teams out of it at this time of year so we can pay attention to the CFL. So I would love nothing more than for this story to repeat itself and for the Leafs to lose tonight. Um, but yeah, it's crazy, isn't it? Like just so much heartbreak over and over before this core four, since the core four, right? Like if you're a Toronto fan, you've got to think, what do we need to do? Well, you got your basketball championship, so you might have to settle for that for a while.
I had thought the meltdown is not official. This was the other night until I see my first video of a jersey being burned in a fire pit. And it was 20 minutes after the game. I'm like, all right, I'm good. I'm officially on full Leafs meltdown. I mean, you have to give Florida credit. They're relentless. They're playing the right way. Paul Maurice is a smart guy. Everybody's bought in. They've got spare parts playing on those third and fourth lines, and they're coming through, and they're huge. And this leads me into, we talk about McDavid and Draisaitl, but the Oilers knock off Vegas. Now, keep in mind, if this was the Vegas Golden Knights from January and February, I think it's a really different series, but it's not. It was the Vegas Golden Knights where the wheels seem to fall off in the past 3 weeks. They win, but they get through to the Western Conference Final again. Were you surprised that they could do it kind of? It wasn't without McDavid and Draisaitl, but not as heavy as it usually is.
Yeah, I was, but I'm also surprised at some of the top players on the Vegas lineup and just how they completely disappeared in this series, right?
Yeah.
And you talked about the wheels falling off and not having Mark Stone, but just the players they did have weren't the players they should have been. And I know everybody's dealing with something, and that happens at this time of year. And there's certainly a lot of stories in Vegas about just how severe the injuries were. But you've got to give the Oilers credit, right? You've got to give Stuart Skinner credit, and I don't know that Vegas really tested him, right? So we'll see what happens in the next round. But when I'm always a believer that momentum never carries in the playoffs, right? Like if the Leafs win tonight, despite winning 6-0, now it would say a lot about the Leafs in terms of character that many of us don't believe they have. But generally, teams can recover from performances like that. That decision in game 3, or was it game 3 or game 4, when Jim Hiller, called for the goalie interference penalty and they didn't get it, and the series completely turned. And they've been able to carry that momentum through the rest of that round and this round, right? So the depth that Edmonton has, which we didn't see a lot of during the regular season, we're now seeing it now, right? And Evander Kane coming back, has helped flesh out their top 6, and he's done some great things for them as well. But just the overall depth that they're playing with, their D right now is better than at any point in last year's playoffs, in my mind. And Ekholm is probably coming back in this series, right? So they potentially could only get better. So you got to give the Oilers credit, and I am surprised that the Knights went as meekly into the night as they did.
Yeah. I was thinking the other night, because now Oiler fans are very passionate, but they're also very judgmental. So let's say they do win the cup for a little penance.
Let's not.
Just listen to me.
Okay.
Just listen. The first 20 minutes of the Stanley Cup parade is just Darnell Nurse by himself in a convertible. That's all you get. Everybody has to apologize before any other the team or the trophy comes out to be like, nope, I am not the whipping boy anymore. And maybe Stu Skinner gets a solid 10 by himself too, because they'd have to apologize to him. All right, let's not put the cart before the horse. But one thing I noticed watching the Jets-Stars game last night, they are going to have to play a lot more physical than the series they're in now when they come up against Edmonton, because Edmonton's crash and bang and they're making it hard on D-men. Like Alex Pietrangelo, if he was injured before that series, which a lot of people say he was, they were crushing him game in and game out. And they're not going to change that. But Dallas and Winnipeg, it's not a physical series. They're not playing that. Outside of Jamie Benn punching Mark Scheifele in the face last night, it really isn't all that physical.
Well, look, I do think Game Five was the most physical game of the series, and I think it's kind of trending in that direction. Beyond the sucker punch and the hate and all of that, like I did see more in the way of hits and more in the way of scrums and a lot of additional uh, stuff like that, right? So I do think the series is headed that way. And you talk about the other series, right? Like go back to the beginning of that Florida series after Game Two, and Paul Maurice's message, which I think NHL.com played about, hit them at every turn, and over the course of a long series, it's going to pay off. And are we seeing some of that here? I don't know. Like it does feel like every team is fresh, but I just think the Dallas Stars have another level to get to. We talked about
Yes.
Vegas and just how quiet their stars have been. Dallas's stars have also been quiet outside of the Finnish players, right? And even Miro Heiskanen, who's just now 2 games back in, I think there's another level for him to get to. He looked a lot better in the last game than he did in the previous game. And I think he could have a big impact. And some of these other guys that have just been really quiet, not only could they have a bigger impact in putting this series away on Saturday, and I'm heading down there tonight so I can cover the game tomorrow in Dallas, but also they have a higher ceiling in terms of what it looks like to potentially beat Edmonton, right? I do think there's a
Hmm.
significantly higher level for Dallas to get to than there is for Winnipeg to get to in terms of a Western Conference final.
Last night, Carolina did what Carolina does. They play stifling defense. They take advantage of opportunities and they win. And here's Oiler fans, Dallas Star fans. I don't necessarily know that a lot of people have paid attention to just how good boring New Jersey Devil 1999-ish 2000 or whatever. They play trap hockey, but Farhan, it works. They don't give up a lot. And their goal, Frederick, it's hard to say Frederick Anderson is one of the best goalies in the Stanley Cup playoffs so far this year. That's not Freddie's MO.
No, it's not, and anybody can go on a run, as they say. So look, I'll be honest. This is the series I've probably watched the least of everything going on right
Mm-hmm.
now. But you're right, and Carolina was. People were expecting this version of Carolina throughout the season, and I don't think we got it, right? Like we got it in fits and spurts, and then they make the big trade, and that doesn't necessarily work out, right? So then they make the trade with Dallas, and I think after they made that trade, they kind of settled in a little bit more to who they are, and we saw a bit of it at the regular season, and we've certainly seen it in this playoff round, especially right against the Capitals that were looking pretty good coming out of round one. So, but yeah, I mean that was probably the least predictable storyline, that Freddie Anderson was going to be the guy going forward, and we'll see how long he can carry them if it's going to be against Florida in the next round.
All right. We're pumping a lot of tires of our own here at Rider Training Camp. What's coming
Okay.
out of the Lions camp there? And you had said before, there's no way that Nathan Rourke would look, if he has a full training camp underneath him and all of this, there's no way he's going to look as bad as he did last year. What's the word from Lions camp so far this year?
Yeah, I talked to a couple of players on the offensive side, and I haven't been to Kamloops, right? I mean, I've been talking to people up there, coaching, management, and and players, and they're excited about what they're seeing from Nathan. They believe he's the Nathan of old, right? And that he's picked up Buck Pierce's offense exceptionally well. He spent a lot of time this offseason digesting it, and even Buck has said that it's opened up some things that I wanted to do that maybe Zach Caleros didn't want to do when I was in Winnipeg. So he's also excited about the possibilities of where this offense can go under Nathan Rourke. So they released a clip yesterday of him taking off for a 50-plus yard touchdown run up the middle, and obviously you're not going to hit the quarterback, but just to see the confidence with which he was running was pretty exciting. So, we'll see. Like, I've got some questions as to what their receiving core is going to look like after the top three. I've got some questions as to what their interior offensive line is going to look like, and I could throw the names out at you, but it probably wouldn't mean anything to your audience. But I do think that the keys that are there feel pretty good about where Nathan is at right now. So we'll see what those couple question mark spots look like, and same thing on defense. I think their D line is going to be a lot better than anyone expects, and the early conversation out of training camp has been good. Secondary is what I want to see. What are their halfbacks going to look like, right? They got Deontay Williams from Saskatchewan, who'll give them a better tackling presence on one of the corners. They'll be good at the other corner with Gary Peterson at safety, but the halfbacks I have concerns with. So let's see what some of those troubled areas look like, and every team seems to have some.
The one thing about the Buck Pierce offense, and when it was announced that he was going to be taking over BC, in his years in Winnipeg, when they were firing on all cylinders, they could score and they could score quickly. And I was like, oh, and with Nathan Rourke. So I doubt that Buck has said, hey, let's slow this thing down. I mean, if you're talking about 50 yarders, the proper answer would have been, Maz, he threw 5 picks in a row yesterday and it's not going well or whatever. And it's going to be a tough year. Oh no,
Well, look, they're going to take a while to get going, right? Like
I know.
this could be the year they lose the opener in front of the big crowd, right? Like they haven't the last few years. But I think it'll take a while for this group to gel, but I do think they will, and I think primarily they will because Nathan's also evolved as a leader as well with this group now, right? So I don't think you can put a price tag on that as you see in Saskatchewan with a tremendous leader like Trevor Harris. It matters.
Final question. Are you the gentleman that will get a chance to go out and introduce Snoop Dogg on stage at BC
Oh,
Place?
that would be fun. Hey. I doubt it. I think they'll have somebody
Okay.
with a little bit more musical cachet than me. But if they ask, I will absolutely do it, and I might even suggest it now that you've brought it up. See, I was hoping we'd
And
bring
I
the panel, and if we brought the panel, then I was gonna, push for Milt to do it, right? But I don't think the panel is coming out for that game. I think they're going to be in Saskatchewan that weekend, actually. But yeah, we couldn't get them out, so yeah, maybe I'll have to sub. I'll have to fill in.
ask him to play gin and watermelon juice for your
All
fans
right,
here in
all
Rider
right.
Nation. It's Farhan Lalji from TSN. Safe travels off to Dallas to cover that Jets game tomorrow. We'll catch up next week. It'll be great. All right, it's
see
time to
us.
take a break.